This past February, new consumer credit card laws went into effect. The government says this will tilt the playing field toward consumers by limiting some of the industry's most profitable and punitive practices. But the card issuers warn it will drive up credit card fees and limit their availability at a time when the country needs more spending to stimulate the economy. Tonight, what do we need to know to get the most out of our credit and debit cards? How do these new policies affect each and every one of us? And will new regulations alter the way debt collectors go about reclaiming unpaid debt? I'm Ernie Manous, and this is Houston 8.
What started with a simple statement, "Put it on my account," has blossomed into a billion-dollar industry. The 1920s gave birth to the modern charge card, initially used to sell fuel to a growing number of car owners. The charger plate, used from the 1930s to the late 1950s, was issued by large-scale merchants. Similar to a military dog tag, these plates were embossed with the customer's name, city, and state. In addition to being a convenience to the customer, these tags helped speed up the bookkeeping process for the merchants. The concept of customers paying different merchants using the same card was implemented in 1950 by the Diners Club in a merger with Dine & Sign. This first general-purpose charge card required the entire bill to be paid with each statement. Up next was Carte Blanche, followed in 1958 by American Express, who issued 1 million cards that could be used at over 85,000 establishments. In September that same year, Bank of America launched the Bank AmeriCard with a new concept of a credit card as opposed to the earlier charge card, giving the card more buying power and flexibility. In time, Bank AmeriCard would evolve into the Visa system. In 1966, in an attempt to compete with Bank AmeriCard, a group of California banks established Master Charge, which became a true contender in 1969 when they merged with Citibank's Everything Card. Since the interest fees on credit cards could mean an easy profit for banks and retailers, these cards were mass-produced and mass-mailed to bank customers who were thought to be good credit risks. In 1970, this practice was outlawed due to the financial chaos it was causing, but not before 100 million credit cards had entered the U.S. marketplace. Just as new laws and regulations come into being, so too are the ways we will be paying for things. Future forms of payment range from online services such as PayPal to RF chips that can be implanted into cell phones, toll tags, and other devices. But from swipe cards to keyring tags, it looks like the plastic cards we have come to depend on are unlikely to pass from the scene anytime soon.
Thank you, Adam Everest, for that report. Now joining us tonight to talk about this issue, Richard Alderman, the People's Lawyer, Director of the Center for Consumer Law at the University of Houston. Welcome back to the program.
Oh, great to be here.
That package ends talking about the future of credit cards, and as they talk about RF chips and all of that, and I see in my own life we carry less and less cash and more is going on these cards. How important have they become to us?
Oh, it's been a long time since cash was the most common way that people pay. I mean, people use credit and debit cards now much more than cash. A lot of people don't ever carry cash, and it's a huge profit center. I was going to say a billion, tens and tens of billions of dollars in profits for the credit card companies. So they have the incentive to make sure we use them, and we like the convenience, we like the ease. The problem is that they're too easy to abuse by both sides. It's too easy for consumers to kind of all of a sudden owe a lot more than they can afford to pay, and it's too easy for the credit card companies and the banks to get us to keep raising and raising how much we'll spend and then raise the interest rates. And that's what Congress has been looking at.
For one more piece of history before we move into the new regulations, just if you know the answer to this, the difference between a charge card and a credit card, what was the difference there?
The difference in it still matters, actually, for federal law purposes and for some statutes. A credit card is a card that allows you to charge something, to buy it, then when you get the bill, to either pay it in full or pay off a portion and keep paying it off over time. A charge card is an American Express card where you can charge it, but when the bill comes in, you have to pay 100% of that amount at the end of the month. And there's different rules and regulations because in one case you're going to be charged interest and certain things should be disclosed. In the other case you're not, so different things are disclosed. But that's the difference.
Pretty much what we're all using today, though, are credit cards for the most part.
Well, American Express is pretty popular.
But still, and that's just a charge card.
That's a charge card. Now, I shouldn't say that. American Express now has its credit card variations. But most people, I use American Express because I don't even want the temptation of paying some 15, 20, 30% interest. I like to know that I better not spend more than I can afford to pay at the end of the month.
And just so people know, even with any charge card, you can do that. You can pay your full balance each month, and that will limit your interest rates.
And then charge cards are great. In fact, and we've talked about this before earlier on other shows, you should always use charge cards because you have legal advantages with a charge card or a credit card that you don't otherwise have. If you shop online, for example, if you buy something from a store that's going to be delivered, if you have a problem, federal law lets you dispute that bill with the charge card company, lets you withhold payment to the charge card company. If you put something on a debit card, if you pay with cash, if you pay with check, you lose those rights. So I think in today's society, to really take advantage of the law, you need to use charge cards and credit cards.
And I assume most of our viewers know this, but just to clear this up too, the difference between charge and credit cards and debit cards.
Debit cards are actually a completely different animal, not just in practical terms, but in legal terms. A debit card is pretty much like cash as far as the law is concerned. What the debit card does is you go in and you give the merchant the debit card. The merchant runs that through, and the money is immediately taken from your account and put into the merchant's account. With a credit card, that will happen, but you will have the right, because you don't pay it for in 20 or 30 days, you have the right to dispute it, you have the right to withhold payment. Those rights don't exist with debit cards. You also have rights if your credit card is stolen or your credit card is lost. The maximum you will ever owe is $50. If you report it before it's used, you have no liability. With a debit card, it's $50 for 3 days. Then it goes to $500. If you wait even longer, it can go up to, you could lose all the money in your account. So debit cards are very handy. A lot of people like debit cards because I can't spend more money than I have, and that's a good reason to use them. But from a pure legal standpoint, the credit card actually offers you more protection.
And last thing in that area, I keep saying that, and I keep going back to another question. Some debit cards we see have a MasterCard, Visa, have a logo on it. What does that mean to us?
It's simply the company that is processing it and the company that issued it.
So it doesn't give you different buying powers.
It doesn't mean anything to you. Now, I should say, a lot of the debit card companies, to make their cards more attractive, will contractually give you the same rights that you would otherwise have under the law. So even though federal law doesn't treat credit cards and debit cards the same, many of the major companies treat them the same by their contract. But that's one of the things people have to look at. You've got to look and say, okay, what if I buy something online and it doesn't arrive? What are my rights to dispute it with a debit card? Many of them will give you the same right you have with a credit card.
And that's case by case with the card issuer itself.
You've got to read. And actually, that's the bottom line for everything we're going to talk about. What the law does now is it eliminates some bad things. But basically, it tries to make sure everybody has more and more information, and you can then take advantage of that information and make better decisions.
How universal is the information? Whenever I get a credit card in the mail, it always comes with that very thin-paged, thick booklet of rules and regulations that I don't know anybody who ever reads.
That they have the right to change next month if they want.
Right.
A lot of it will still be long. A lot of it will still be difficult to follow, but the major things will have to be disclosed. So, for example, one of the things that now must be disclosed, must be right up front where you can find it, that was never disclosed before, and in fact the credit card companies fought this continuously. They have to tell you, if you keep making the minimum payment, how long will it take you to pay off the bill. I don't think most people realize that if you make the minimum payment, there's a good chance that it'll be 10 or 20 years at 20 or 30% interest before you pay off that bill. What the law hopes will happen is when you look and you see wait, if I keep paying the minimum, I don't pay this off till 2021, you'll say, that's a long time. Maybe I should start paying a little bit more. Maybe I should spend a little less and pay this amount down. So the major information that you need, it should be more obvious.
Tell me a little bit about credit reports. If I'm going to apply for a credit card, they are going to look at my credit report. I remember hearing, I don't know how accurate this is, too many times someone looks at your credit report will hurt your credit report.
Well, you're mixing and matching.
Okay.
Your credit report can't be hurt because that's just information. Your credit report
your score then.
It's your score that will get hurt. Your credit report, what the law does is the law gives you rights to make sure that it's complete and accurate. So if you're not paying your bills, it's in your credit report and you can't change it. But if anything in there is incomplete or anything is inaccurate, you have the right to demand it be reinvestigated. There are time limits. The credit bureau must reinvestigate it. The creditor must verify it. If it's a mistake, they must send a corrected report to everybody that relied on the incorrect report. And there was a change in the law a while ago that's very significant here. You have the right to get one free copy of your credit report from each of the 3 credit bureaus every year. And what everybody should do, I think this is the 4th year I've been telling my wife to do this, so that's how successful and how persuasive I am with people.
Has she been doing it?
No, she hasn't done it yet. I'm sorry, Janie. It's every 4 months you should go to one of the 3 credit bureaus because they're all basically the same and get your free copy. What that will do is it pretty much will ensure that you are continually correct. It also lets you catch almost all identity theft. Identity theft is a drawn-out process. It's not something that somebody steals your identity today and tomorrow they start using it. It takes a while. And if you look at your credit report and review it, you will usually see signs that something's going on. Like, wait a minute, my identity was stolen. And I looked at my credit report after the fact, and I saw that I had moved to San Diego. And if the law was the law at that time as it was now, I would have caught that. And I would have called the credit bureau and said, I haven't moved to San Diego. Something's going on. But it's a very valuable right that everybody has that you should take advantage of. It's very simple to do. You go online. You can pick which one of the 3 you want. If you mess up and you go on too early, they'll tell you, you just got one 8 months ago. You can't get another one. And it's just essential to do that.
We can find all this information at your website?
At my website, everything's there.
peopleslawyer.net.
That's it.
Not just www.peopleslawyer.net. Okay, so they can find out more. While we're talking, it seems to get a little dense or a little confusing.
If we lose anybody, every single word I'm going to say is probably written in there somewhere.
Okay, on credit reports, one more time, too. Why is it something that is a strike against you if you look at your credit report too often? Why do they care?
It's not if you look at it. If creditors are looking at it. Because that tells creditors you're looking to borrow more and more money. And for example, if they look and they say, last year you got a credit card, you haven't done anything in a year, they'll think, okay, they have one credit card, they've maintained a good credit rating, they've paid their bills on time, that's good. But then if they see that 5 companies have looked at your credit report, which means you went to those 5 companies to borrow money, they're going to think you have some need financially. You're trying to borrow, and that's not as good. So it won't hurt you. For example, you go to buy a car, and both car dealers are going to run a credit search on you. That's not going to hurt you. But if you start applying for 4 or 5 credit cards, it's going to come back to haunt you. I learned this the hard way. I really didn't think about this. Our family likes to travel, and we go to baseball parks a lot, especially when my son was younger. And we would always try to get souvenirs. And being cheap, I looked for the free souvenirs. And you can always get free souvenirs.
Fill out a credit card application.
That's all you have to do. So I had my Yankees and my Mets and the White Sox blankets and you name it, I had it. And all of a sudden, my credit score was going down and down and down. I mean, I rejected all the cards when they came simply because I had applied. And the creditors start thinking, what's going on? Why will somebody be doing this? If they didn't need the money, they wouldn't be applying for this. So you do have to be careful about how many times you apply. Sometimes it's a good idea if you go to a bank, for example, and you're thinking about borrowing the money, make sure you talk to them and say, look, I just want some information. I don't want you to look up my credit report. I don't want anything on there. If I can tell you, hypothetically, here's how much I make, will you loan me this much? And you say, we don't have to waste any time talking. I want to just leave without anything on my credit report.
And then they'll be, why does he want us not to look at his credit report? And then they'll check it anyway. If they do make guarantee they won't check it legally, are they not allowed to?
That's a tough one. I mean, yes. I mean, they're not supposed to check it without your permission.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit broader about when you get a credit card, the interest rates you have to pay on those cards. Does that have anything to do with your credit report? Do they adjust your interest, or is their published interest rate what you're going to pay?
Absolutely. That's the interest rate you will pay will depend on your credit rating. And now your credit rating is what this one company, Fair Isaac, basically, they rate. They won't tell anybody how they do it. They will give you a number somewhere between 1 and 850, I think it is. And if you have 850, you will pay less interest than somebody with 750, who will pay less interest than somebody with 650. And once you start getting below that, I just saw there is a credit card company now charging 78% a year interest. It's for people who have very bad credit.
Yeah.
You can't go anywhere else. But maintaining a good credit report is just so essential. When you see the rates advertised for a mortgage, mortgages available at this rate, car loans available at this rate, there's always the small print that says it's for people with the best credit score or the best credit rating. So that's one of the most important factors.
Okay, I'm wandering off into a bunch of different areas. Give us some laws, rules, regulations that have changed that make a difference to our audience watching.
As I said, one is your ability to get a free copy of your credit report once a year from each credit bureau. The other laws that have changed that people really will start seeing a difference, the Credit Card Act of 2009, which it's capital C-A-R-D, it's Credit Accountability, Responsibility, and Disclosure is what it says. It addressed a lot of the most abusive practices. It dealt with some of them by just saying you can't do it. It dealt with some of them by saying you've got to disclose it. So some of the changes. Credit card companies can no longer use what's called universal default. Universal default was when the credit card company would look at your credit report and see, well, you've never missed a payment on us, but you missed a payment to somebody else last year. We're going to raise your rates. They can no longer do that. They have to base the decision about whether to raise your interest rate on what you do with that credit card. They also must give you 45 days notice. They used to just give you whatever was in the contract, which should be a couple of days. They have to give you 45 days notice now of any change. And earlier we were talking about promotional rates and things. They can't change the promotional rate. The promotional rate has to be good for at least 6 months. They have to give you 45 days.
Explain right here the difference between what is a promotional rate and your first rate with this credit card. I apply for my credit card and it's telling me, 6.9% interest rate. How do I know what is a promotional rate and what is my real rate?
It all has to be explained. And as I said, that promotional rate has to be for at least 6 months. And generally now, they can't change the rate for a year unless you miss a payment or you're late on payments or something has happened with respect to that bill. They can't change a rate for purchases and things for a year. And the promotional rate will be what you start at. And they have to tell you how long that's going to go. And people do have to be careful because those promotional rates will be very attractive, and that was what was going on in the past. The promotional rate would be 4 or 5%. And because of this universal default, they were able to raise that rate anytime they wanted. So you would have a 4 or 5% rate that you could easily afford making your payments. 2 or 3 months later, it goes to 24%. And now you have problems. They cannot do that anymore. They also, your billing date has to basically be the same. They have you 21 days to pay your bills. Some of the credit card companies had gotten so short that by the time you got the bill, if you wrote out a check and you put it in the envelope and you mailed it, you'd be late.
Right.
Another thing that credit card companies were doing that they can no longer do, they were setting crazy times for when the bill had to be there. They would tell you, your bill must be received by August 12th. And then it would say, August 12th means 5 a.m. August 12th. So if you walked into their office, the minute the door opened and you gave them a check on August 12th, you would be late. So they can't do that. You have to have till the end of the day. If your billing date is a weekend or a holiday, you're not late if it arrives the next day. Some of the other, in my opinion, the most significant thing, and I hope people really pay attention to this and make the right decision. One of the things that banks use to make the largest percent of their profits, and more than what they might even be making on the interest, were fees and over-the-limit fees. People were paying hundreds of dollars because they would buy a cup of coffee, and then they'd go buy a sandwich, and then they'd go buy something else, gas, and each time they didn't have enough money in the account with their debit card. So that $2 cup of coffee would cost them $35 in fees, and the $5 sandwich would cost them $35 in fees. Now, you cannot be charged over-the-limit fees at all unless you affirmatively opt in. In other words, you sign a form saying, I want to pay those fees. Hopefully, what people will do is make the decision of, if I don't have the money in the bank, just deny the charge. I'd rather not buy the cup of coffee than pay that $35 fee.
Okay, so that's the option. It's either it stops you and says you can't purchase it, or you sign off this form, this waiver.
Well, you have to sign it initially. In other words, the bank has been sending these out for a while.
Right.
And from that point on, and you can change your mind whenever you want. You can opt in and opt out with the bank. It won't be on each charge.
Right.
You won't
what I'm
be
saying
asked on
is,
each charge.
once you sign into it,
you're into it.
But if you don't sign into it, your card will just be rejected.
And actually, some banks are just paying it. If it's a relatively small amount, some banks, Bank of America, for example, has stopped charging the fee. You don't have an option. They're not even giving you the option because they, I assume, decided this was going to cost us so much to do it, and it was offending so many customers when they were getting these bills that it would be better to not do it. And if you remember when I said debit cards are like cash, it treats debit cards like cash. If you don't have the cash, you don't spend it.
So in a sense, that's a nice protection to have also, because you're not going over your means.
I think that everybody should just treat a debit card like cash, and if you don't have that money, don't spend it, especially with what it costs. And spending $35 or $40 to buy something that you easily could do without. It's usually something relatively small, spur of the moment, I need a cup of coffee or something like that.
Quickly, as we run out of time, there are a lot of people out there right now that are facing a lot of credit card troubles. They have lost their jobs. They are unable to make their payments, their bills. You were even saying before we started that the majority of people who don't pay their bills can't pay their bills.
Based on the emails I get discussing things with consumers, the vast, vast majority are honest debtors. They simply can't afford to pay what they're being asked to pay. And this is another area where it's a question of knowing your rights, and then you can make the decisions you should make.
So what do our viewers do right now that are up against the wall? They don't have enough to...
The first thing is you have to know what can happen. You have to know the end game. The worst thing that can happen, if I'm sued, what can happen? And in Texas, it's not very much. There's no wage garnishment in Texas. They can't take your house. They can't take $30,000 worth of property for an individual, $60,000 for a family. They can't take Social Security money. They can't take IRA or retirement money. There's not too much that can happen if you're sued. Once you know that, all of a sudden it changes the attitude of the debt collector, because the debt collectors will threaten you with wage garnishment. They will threaten to tell your employer. They will threaten to take your car or your house. They can't do that, and in fact, federal law, all of those things are illegal. Any of those threats. Debt collectors are not, it's illegal to call anyone except the debtor, the consumer. If they call your employer or anybody else for any reason other than to get location information, they violated the law.
Sorry, Richard, we have to stop right there. We're out of time. Now, each week we invite you at home to visit us online at HoustonPBS.org. Simply click on the local program bar, pick Houston 8, and you can join our online community. Read about the guests, learn more about the topics, share your thoughts and ideas, and even suggest questions that we might ask during upcoming episodes. Remember, information posted on our website may be used on air, so keep that in mind when submitting. And for more information on this topic, you can visit peopleslawyer.net, where you can also get information about Richard's book, Know Your Rights, recently updated with all the new credit card laws. That does it for us tonight. Until next time, have a great week.